Thank you, Brian. That's that kind of hits me, having raised, or almost raised, a son, and to no fault of his own. There's certain, I've thought about it several times. If I had it to do over, there's more things I would have took a little more initiative in training. Not that he's a bad kid at all, but just some little things that wished I'd have done differently. But anyway, thank you for that. That is good information. And I remember saying to Clyde Boss one time, I don't remember what I said to him. It was over at the other place, and he said, and it's something about exercise. And he quoted me a scripture, which only Clyde would know exactly where it's at, about how bodily exercise is of little use or whatever. I was trying to find it, but I couldn't. It doesn't negate what Brian just said. It's just, I guess it's like anything else, overindulgence in that alone, that becomes your, But anyway, that's good information. Thank you for sharing that. I don't need a title for today except for Last Day of Unleavened Bread, I suppose. And it's a good-looking bunch of de-leavenated folks we have here. And I wonder how long it's been. I thought about this morning. I wonder how long it's been since the last day of unleavened bread fell on Friday the 13th. And then, almost as soon as I thought that, I thought, well, that's probably not a statistic that's even kept up with. I'm not sure it's not even significant. It's like asking when was the last time a purple car passed the driveway out here under the full moon of a Wednesday night or so. I mean, everything could be a statistic if you wanted to get that silly about it. But and I don't even know, I've read it before, exactly where the significance of Friday the 13th comes from, and I don't know that it is anything worth even noting. But it seems like that date always stands out when you realize it's Friday and it's the 13th. For me, growing up, it was the horror movies and that kind of stuff. So,
also nice that the kids are out of school on spring break this week. Yeah.
Because it's Friday the 13th. We all know school doesn't operate on Friday. But it's no matter the date. It's no matter the date, the physical date by the calendar that we try to keep up with, except, the date doesn't matter except that it meets the Father's instruction. Of course, that is important. And like that scripture that I mentioned to you in Numbers 28, it talks about the 14th day of the first month, and then, of course, the 15th day of the first month being the first day of unleavened bread. And then, of course, 7 days of unleavened bread. But whatever. That has to be met, at least as close as we can these days. And it is significant at that point. But it is significant to this little smattering, this little gathering of people right here, and those like us in other places. So it does, in that way, make a difference to the date. The children of Israel were, and I think about this, that we're here, and Mom, Dad, and I were talking about it the other day. It doesn't seem like we could have been in the days of unleavened bread for 7 days or 5 days at that point. Already we were 5 days in, and here we are at the last day. But what I think about is the children of Israel were 7 days separated from Egypt at this time when they, because they had the Passover, and then they had the first day of unleavened bread when they left out. And so by this time there were 7 days of separation from Egypt. Now, as I mentioned at Passover and a little bit during the first day of unleavened bread, that's our journey as well. And by that you should feel a little bit differently than you did before we started the days of unleavened bread. And I don't mean that just spiritually. I mean, it's a physical. You probably feel different physically because of those 7 days of no leavening or limited leavening. We know that we breathe in leavening and we get a little bit, here and there. But you should feel different physically and spiritually. It should have had effects, those 7 days of unleavened bread, physically and spiritually. That's the goal. We hope that it had some effects and that happened and that you feel differently both ways. It's a life change. It was a life change for them all those years ago, and that separation from Egypt. It's a life change for us, hopefully. And we should feel different physically and spiritually, and we should go forward with that life change. And they were not always convinced, as we can read through that and understand, they were not always convinced that it was better. Even though there were 7 days of separation by the last day of unleavened bread, then they weren't always convinced that their situation was better. Didn't matter what they saw or had experienced. And we stand at our vantage point and say, what? I mean, the stuff that they saw, and I know that we go over this, and I'm not really getting into that today. I'm just making that point. We look at it here in 2012, and we look back and read that and think, how in the world? But don't you think the powers at the throne today can look at us with the same amazement and think, what? Because and there's a lesson to be learned there. We can look back then, and we can be looked at today, and it's kind of the same expression. We're not always seeing our good fortune, brethren. And we fail to see, too, I believe, the sweetness that is in the destination, the glory, the goodness, and the preciousness that is in the destination that we're after. That's where it's at, not necessarily the trip. No one has ever told us or promised us that the journey, the trip, the trek that we're taking through the wilderness and over the river and through the woods, or however you want to look at it, would be sweet and pleasant and nice. But that's not what it's about. It's about the destination. And I met a guy here the other day, and I may have told you this, when I was out here mowing, before the first day of unleavened bread. And there was a guy across the street over here. I had went to refill the trimmer and was coming back up through here. I looked across the road, and there was a guy over there with an orange shirt on, walking the fence line over there, and just kind of looking and picking up something. I thought, and he looked over here and he just waved, and I thought, well, he didn't wave at that point. I just saw him walking over there. Well, the time I got around here and got the weed eater, ready to crank back up, he was on a mower, much like the one we got down here, and he was going down through there. And then that's when he was just waving. I thought, hey, I thought it was just somebody that worked for the city of Statesville, or Well, I cranked up the trimmer, and I'm out here on this side of the building with the bushes, and I looked around, and there's a lawnmower right here. And I turned around, and he's not if he's not a big enough man anyway, and he stands up on that lawnmower. How you doing? My name's Chris Daniel. Are you the pastor here? I said, yeah, I am. He said, well, how you doing? He said, I'm a Sabbath keeper too. And he said, I've been coming by here. I've been mowing the grass for some guy down here that owns some seafood place he named. He said, I mow his grass, and I guess he just takes it upon himself to mow over here too. If it looks like it needs mowing, he just mows it. But anyway, we stand out here and have a conversation. And actually that's where I was at instead of back here. But anyway, he's telling me about, they have a church over on Bingham Street. It's been there for 80 years, 90 years, I think he said. And he said some of our saints are even, they're strict about the Sabbath. Now they don't even travel. They won't even ride. He said, so we got an $80,000 or $180,000 thing that we built on to the back of the church. It's kind of like a little apartment complex so the people can come on Friday and spend the night and, stay the night, don't have to try. I'm thinking, cool, you go. And he said, well, you think sometimes you're out here alone, and he started naming off all these churches in Statesville and Hickory and Newton and blah, 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 all these. He said, there's Sabbath keepers everywhere. I said, yeah, that's good to know, and he wanted to know who we were associated with, so on and so forth. And I said, well, we're just independent. We're still associated with some other groups, but we pretty much operate. And it was just a good conversation, and it was just a blessing to But one of his comments, and the reason I brought it up, he said, well, I'll let you go. I know you're busy. I said, yeah, he said, yeah, we got to hurry. Sabbath's dawning, ain't it? We got to hurry. But he was talking about how the Sabbath was a mark on people. It sets you apart. It's something that it's evidence. It's a mark. And there's truth to that. It is the 10th command. It is, it makes us different. Helps us to be recognized. It makes us. But these 7 days are also distinguishing apart from just a weekly Sabbath. We've been doing something, these seven days that's also distinction. And I hope you believe that. I hope you believe that there's more to it than just what we get from it physically and spiritually. But there's some more qualities to it as well. It's distinguishing. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I think about Moses, and after 120 years of life, he was gathered up, it says, to his fathers. And what a life that was. And you can't even put it in a capsule. You can't, no matter how many times you watch the Ten Commandments, that doesn't cover the life of Moses. It hits the high spots, and it helps bring it, as many fallacies as there is in it. It's still, you can't. I know Linda was turning the TV the other day, probably around Easter, I guess. The movie was on, and you stop and you watch it for a few minutes. Because it's just, and I guess it's a childhood thing, it's more sentimentality than anything else. But what a life that was. And even after that life, he was not allowed to enter the promised land. He was not allowed to do that, but yet, when we read in the New Testament and we read about the Mount of Transfiguration, who was there? Who was it that was called back? Moses. And who was it the disciples saw there communing with the Messiah? Moses and Elijah, or the likenesses anyway of Moses and Elijah. And to a lot of people, and I don't have any argument for it, for or against it, but a lot of people, recognize him as, a future witness, one of the future witnesses. Maybe so. The fact is, though, that's a monumental story, first off. And it's also, to me, a view into the mind of the Most High, at least a glimpse. If you could put Moses' life in a snapshot, in a capsule or a collage or whatever it is, to me it gives you at least a glimpse into the mind of the Almighty, and of the nuances of the entire scope and instructions of this book. And they're all in there, and it's amazing. And what he reveals of himself in the life of Moses, to me, is quite remarkable. And again, it's so deep, and there's no way. That could be a year's worth of messages and sermons wouldn't cover that, or even a Bible study. The life of Moses and all the little nuances and intricacies you can see in that, and the glimpse it gives you into the overall, instruction. So, but it doesn't end there. Even though at 120, it says his vigor, he still had his vigor, his eyes weren't dim with age, but he was gathered up to his fathers. And a life ended, a huge life. But it doesn't end there. I want you to turn with me, and I want to try not to read too much of this, but in Joshua chapter 3, and of course we know that he was the one that he was below on another part of the mountain perhaps with Moses during the 40 days and 40 nights and that kind of stuff. And we know that Joshua was a strong man, a fit man, a warrior, a fighter. You talk about what our Savior looked like as a teenager, and I'm sure Joshua would be a pretty impressive man. Not that he was, 7 foot tall and looked like Goliath, but Joshua was a man, and I think Scripture bears that out remarkably. In fact, a lot of these people in the Scriptures are not men like we have today. We are a soft society, not just our young people. In Joshua chapter 3, and I'm going to begin in the first verse. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim and came to Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And this is after some instruction. It came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the eternal your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall remove from your place and go after it. So this is your signal to move when this happens, okay? That's pretty easily understood. Yet there will be a space between you and it. There will be a space between you and this ark of the covenant about 2,000 cubits. Now a cubit's 18 inches times 2,000. You can figure, it's half a yard. A cubit's half a yard. So you take 2,000. I'm not going to do the math right here in my head because my math in my head is just not that quick. But 2,000 cubits is a pretty good distance. Come not near unto it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before, or heretofore. And Joshua said unto the people, sanctify yourselves. Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Eternal will do wonders among you. And Joshua spake unto the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant, and pass over before the people. And they took up the ark of the covenant, and they went before the people. And the Eternal said unto Joshua, on this day I'm going to begin to magnify you, Joshua, in the sight of all of Israel, that they may know that I, as I was with Moses, so will I be with you. And you shall command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you are come to the brink of the water of Jordan, you shall stand still. You shall stand still in Jordan. And Joshua said unto the children, come hither and hear the words of the Eternal your God. And Joshua said, hereby you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Eternal of the earth passes over before you into Jordan. Now therefore take you 12 men, one out of each tribe of Israel, and it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests bear the ark of the Eternal of all the earth shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters, now this is going to be a flashback here, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand upon a heap. This isn't, gradual. This is water hitting an invisible wall. Here it is. And it says that the river overflows during this time of the harvest and everything. But here it's going to stand in a heap. And it came to pass when the people removed from their tents to pass over, and the priest bearing the ark and the covenant before the people, and as they that bear the ark were coming to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water. And it says here that the Jordan overflows all his banks, all the time of harvest. That the waters which came down from above, upstream, stood, and they rose up in a heap, very far from the city of Adam. That is beside Zartan. And those that came down toward the sea and the plain, even the salt sea, failed, and were cut off. And the people passed right over against Jericho. And the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Eternal stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all the Israelites passed over on dry ground. Not the first time this happened, is it? Until all the people were passed clean over the Jordan. And just a little ways in chapter 4. And it came to pass when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, that he spake unto Joshua, saying, take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man. And command you them, saying, take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones. I want you to take these 12 stones and carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where you shall lodge this night. And Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel, out of every tribe a man. And Joshua said unto them, pass over before the ark of the Eternal your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take you up every man a stone upon his shoulder. Now this isn't reaching down and picking up a little river rock. This is a stone big enough to put on your shoulder, it says. A stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign, that this may be a distinguishment among you, that when your children ask their fathers in times to come, saying, what do you mean, or what mean you these stones? By these stones. And I've told you before about a book that I picked up one time at Linda's sister's house about the Waldensians. The name of the book, What Mean These Stones? And I didn't know, a lot of that story until I read through that book, not all of it, but and it was familiar with these scriptures here in Joshua. So that you can tell your children, what mean you these stones? That you shall answer them that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Eternal. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off. And these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. And the children of Israel did so as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, as he had commanded unto Joshua according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them into the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones. Not only those 12 stones, but it says Joshua went and set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priest, which bear the ark of the covenant, stood. And they are there unto this day, unto this writing anyway. I'm not sure that they're there today. I don't know that they're not, but it's quite an amazing story about a memorial. And it's not just a memorial then. When we read these scriptures, it's a memorial now. These days, brethren, these days of unleavened bread not only cause us to look back in memorial, but they cause us to look at the present. They cause us to look forward. There's so much rich tapestry in all of God's plan, and especially His holy days. And these days are that kind of memorial. Forward, backwards, where you came from, where you are, where you're going. The miracles along the way, even though you may not recognize them or want to recognize them. But there's something else. At least there's something else to me. This thing that we're doing, starting when we kept the Passover and began the days of unleavened bread, it can also be a picture of your building, your personal building every year. It should be a picture. Every year. Something that we take stock and we look and we think about it and we evaluate. Because the Scripture tells us that when we start doing these things, we go back to Numbers or wherever those Scriptures are we want to look at that talks about the holy days, and it says, on the 14th day of the first month, it talks about this will be the beginning of months to you. Now, if we were to go back, I seen a woman the other night that posted on the Intercontinental website, said, I meant to wish y'all, and this is right after Passover, I meant to wish y'all Happy New Year's 14 days ago. Because we keep the Passover on the 14th day of the first month being the beginning of a year, so therefore, the beginning of that first month is, the new year, which makes sense that it would begin when things are turning green and the grass is coming up and, butterflies are fluttering around. That's the beginning of a new year. We all know that. But wherever those scriptures are, it says that this is the beginning of months. Now, let me ask you, if the holy days paint that picture of God's plan of salvation, is that beginning of months and that beginning of the holy day season, should not also picture a beginning of your building, of your foundation? This is where I start. This is every year. Every year. I can make another go. That's what we try to do. It can also be looked at as the foundation, the beginning of months. How you start. How you start with the keeping of the Lord's Supper, Passover, whatever, and the days of unleavened bread. How you start there and how you move forward from that point. It's a foundation. It's a building block. The beginning of months. How you start. Now let's move over to Luke chapter 14. Now, Luke chapter 14 is an interesting chapter. And I'm going to go backwards. I want to go backwards in the chapter of Luke because I'm going to start in Luke chapter 14 and verse 27. Luke 14 and verse 27. And I want you to think about what I just said. This is the beginning of months. We went through the first 7-day portion of God's plan of salvation, this tapestry that He paints every year with the holy days that shows us His plan of salvation. We've heard that ever since we've been, a part of the church. And it does, it's true. But in Luke chapter 14 and verse 27 it says, whosoever, and this is the words of our Messiah, and whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. We get our minds around that. We understand it. We know that it's a choice. It's work. It's something we have to do and accept and be part of. If you don't take up whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And he asked the question, for which of you intending to build a tower? Any kind of building. Here he uses the example of a tower, or whatever your translation may say. Intending to build a tower, who does that but doesn't sit down first and count the cost and think, okay, this is what it's going to take for me to build this castle or this tower. This is what it's going to take. Whether it's money, effort, all these things. That's the cost, isn't it? That's the cost of building something. Everything that it's going to take for you to accomplish that goal. Think about it. And then decide whether you want to undertake to do it or not. But who doesn't do that? Anybody that's planning to build this impressive structure sits down and counts the cost. Can I finish it? Is the question you have to ask. Lest, haply, after you've laid the foundation, you're not able to finish it. Now, how many years have we laid the foundation? How many years have we went through the days of unleavened bread and all those things? So, do you have sufficient to finish what you've started? You've laid the foundation, but you're not able to finish it. And all that behold it began to mock him, saying, this man began to build, but he wasn't able to finish. He was able to build, but he wasn't able to finish. Now, you've been doing something else, different. Not that people that know you best don't already know that you're different, but you've been doing something else different. Just like Brian was talking about. I bet you ain't eating much bread this week. Right? And it's comical, but it's rational. People that don't know. It sounds like silly questions to us. But yet, there was some exposure to this person. Hey, maybe he's never heard about the days of unleavened bread before. He has now. Does it make any difference? Well, who knows? That's not for us to decide. You've been doing something else different this week besides all the different stuff that you already do. We're here on a Friday. Those seeing you today and this past week and what you've been doing, what they see in the future, because if they seen you this week and you've made it known to them, well, I'm taking 7 days of unleavened bread. 7 days I'm not eating leaven, and it's all about this and it's all about that, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what... if they see you a year from now or 5 years from now, and you're back out there doing everything everybody else is doing, what does that say to them? What kind of statement does that make to them about the Almighty? Or about you? I remember I talked to him a couple years ago, and he's out there keeping unleavened something. He ain't doing it now. Look at him. So we can't, that can't be insignificant, right? Because we have to sit down at the beginning and count the cost. Can I finish it? You're doing it. You're building. You're still on your foundation, or we're starting over with the not starting over, but maybe refurbishing our foundation at this part of the year. What will they see in the future? And what statement does that make? It's also something worth remembering that the verses 34 and 35 of that same chapter, Luke 14. We need to remember that, because it says salt, flavoring, seasoning is good. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? Because it is neither fit for the land, and not even for the dunghill. But men cast it out. He that has ears, let him hear. What that's saying to me is salt can't be refurbished. You got a shaker full of salt, and you wash it, or you whatever you can do with salt to make it lose its punch, its savor. And we all know how. I mean, a tomato or anything with a little salt sprinkled on it, man, just enhances it, doesn't it? That's what it is. It's a flavor enhancer. And we've been through all that stuff about salt's properties. It's a cleansing agent. It's purify. It's all these different things. It's astringent. All these different things that salt can do and be. That's a different subject for another day. But once it's lost its savor, you can't run it through a process and it become good, flavorful salt again. It's just grit. It's grit. It's good for nothing. That is the serious side of being salt of the earth. If we're the flavoring, if those people that are keeping the days of unleavened bread, if we are the salt of the earth, we can't be refurbished, can we? If we lose it, if we let our flavor go and it happens. What good is it? Salt, it says in verse 34 and 35, if it's lost its savor, what do you season it with? You can't recover it. But again, that's the serious side of being salt of the earth. Our opportunity is now. Our opportunity is now, not future. Some people, like the guy that he was talking to, may have that opportunity. His opportunity isn't now. Maybe it's becoming now, but he's still got that opportunity that we have ours now. And we know that, and we know that that's the serious side of it. We got to taste it now. And I said I was going to back up. I started in Luke 14:27. Now let's go back up to Luke 14, verse 15. Luke, same chapter, 14, but at verse 15. And when one of them that sat at meat with him heard the things that he was saying, and we'll get to those in a minute, but when they heard these things, he said to him, Blessed is he that shall eat bread in the kingdom of God. And then he said unto him, A certain man made a great supper, and he bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, Come, for all things are ready. All things are now ready. And they all, with one consent, began to make excuse. And we know how they go. The first said unto him, Well, I've bought a piece of ground, and it's got to be taken care of, and I got to go see it, so have me excused. Have me excused. I just can't be there. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I've got to go test them. I've got to prove them, see if they're worth anything. I pray that you'll have me excused. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So the servant came and showed his lord these things, and the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, Okay, I want you to go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city and bring hither the poor and the maimed, the halt, and the blind. If these people I've sent invitations to don't want to come, then I want you to go out and get these people. The servant said, Lord, it is done, you have commanded, as you have commanded, and yet there's room. Still room at the table. And he said unto the servant, Go out to the highways and the hedges. Know the song? In the highways and hedges. Go out to the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in that my house may be full, or that it may be filled. For I say unto you, that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my supper. None of them that got the original invitation will taste my supper. It's not going to happen. So we got to pay attention to that as well. Because you were bidden. You came here last Thursday evening. You didn't say, well, I just married a wife, or I just bought a house, or a piece of land, or, I've got these things that need to be done, that needs to be done. You have to excuse me, I can't be there. No, you came. And in light of this parable, when it says, those that were originally invited shall not taste my supper. In the light of that parable, it looks like a smart move that you came. And it's not just here, we know that. It's anywhere you could have went and kept that service. But Smart move. Because I don't want to be in that last line. Bidden, there's scripture abounds that says, many are called and few are chosen. And it even talks about there's going to be those that shall seek. There's going to be a time when there's going to be people that realizes, hey, I should have been part of that. I should have been, well, and there's scripture that talks about that. Then there's a scripture that talks about the foolish virgin. The door's shut. Who are you? Who's there? Well, it's us. We've done this, and well, I don't know who you are. He says the same thing here. Those that were bidden shall not taste my supper. Because they had all these excuses and all these reasons. Well, again, brethren, it looks like a smart move. That you were bidden, you were invited, and you didn't make excuses not to come. Now, the results of that, plus these 7 days that you've taken, the results, a lot of it's in attitude. I'm backing up again in Luke chapter 14. We're going to go back to verse 7. We just got through with 15 through 24. We read 27 through 30, and actually 34 and 35. Now we're backing up to verse 7 of chapter 14. And he put forth a parable to those which were bidden. Those bidden that he says is not going to be there. You're not going to taste my supper. And he put forth a parable to those which were bidden when he marked how they chose out the chief room, saying unto them, when you are bidden of any man to a wedding. Now this is just so common sense when you read it. When you are bidden of a man to a wedding, don't go sit in the highest room. Don't go sit in the best seat first. Because what's that going to do to you? When the man that invited you or the person that invited you comes and say, wait a minute, in front of all those people that's come in after you did. You came in and said, I must be in the best seat like Bob Euchre in those old Miller Lite commercials. I must be on the front row. And you take the best seat. And all those other people come in, and then the person has to come to you and say, you're in the wrong seat. And everybody in there sees you have to get up and move to the back. Don't do that, it says. Don't have the big head and come in thinking you've got the best seat in the house. Take the lowest seat. So then, when that person that invites you comes in and says, you don't have to sit here. Come up here and take one of these good seats. Then everyone in there sees you take, then you're elevated, aren't you? Not that you do it for that purpose. It's just the attitude. It's the attitude. Well, I must be in the lower seat. I'm not going to, make a show. I'm just going to sit down back here and, Then they come and say, hey, you're my friend. And you think about that. If you take the lowest position in whatever it is in your undertaking of this Christian walk, this way of life that you don't take the highest position first and then have to be knocked down. What if the Messiah comes and moves you up? And that's what it's all about. It's about attitude, and that's what the results of these 7 days. That's part. A lot of the results should be an attitude. But let's finish. I just kind of went into the story and didn't read the scripture. He said, when you bid a man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room. Don't go in and sit down in the highest room, lest there are more honorable man than you be bidden of him, and he shall bade thee and come and say to you, give this man place. And you begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when you are bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he hath bade you come, he may say unto you, friend, go up higher. Then shall you have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. For whosoever exalts himself shall be abased. And we know that the whole picture of this book paints the same picture. Whosoever will exalt himself shall be abased, and he that humbles himself shall be exalted. And then he said to him also that bade him, when you make dinner or a supper, call not your friends or your brethren, neither your kinsmen or your rich neighbors, lest they also bid you again, and recompense be made, unless you get paid back. I'm going to invite all my rich friends and neighbors and all that stuff, so when they have something, they're going to invite me. And it's the same principle. But when you make a feast, if your attitude's right, this is what you'll do. And this is the instruction of the Messiah. When you make a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you shall be blessed, because they cannot pay you back. But where will you be repaid? In the resurrection of the just. If there is no motivation, then they're right there to be in the resurrection of the just. Decent and common sense behavior. But maybe it's not so common. Maybe it's not so common. And I could read on in these scriptures, and we know that it's all there. All these things that we should do, the way that we should do them, the way that we should conduct ourselves. I'm just trying to say that these days are a look back, they're a look now, they're a look ahead. So many different things that we can associate with this and make analogies and do all that kind of stuff. But one of the things about being deleavenated, because it says, do you not realize that a little leaven leavens the whole lump, and the scriptures associated with that, but our attitude should have changed. And sometimes I wonder about, sometimes I just get irritable, and everything's, and there's been a couple of days this week. But I've got to work on that, and hopefully your overall attitude is improved. You feel different physically. You feel different spiritually because of the things that you've been doing these 7 days. It's not just taking a piece of a matzo and putting it in your mouth and, okay, I fulfilled my duty for today. 7 days passed lickety-split. And I know that it won't take us all long. We probably may not do it tonight because we have to wait till after sundown anyway, and sundown now is almost 8 o'clock. We're probably not going to run out and, bring back in all the puffiness. But over the next few days, we'll start doing it. But brethren, we can't forget that we worked on our foundation this week. We worked on our foundation. It's the beginning of months. It's the beginning of the painting of that picture. We're trying to make a difference. I hope we are. I hope that's what we're all doing. We're trying to make a difference. We're trying to reach a destination. We're trying to be obedient. We're trying not to ignore the summons. We got invited. We didn't make excuses. So again, we're trying to make a difference. We're trying to reach a destination. And if we can bring along, or if the Father can bring along through us, or better yet, by us through the glorious one, the Lamb, the King, the Messiah, we don't do it. He says, no man comes to the Father except by me. So no matter what accomplished, if we do bring someone along, it's not through us, it's through him and us being a tool in his hand. This is a bonus. This is a bonus, but we individually have to get there. And part of that getting there is working on the foundation, and that's what we've had another chance to do these last 7 days. And it's not over. We're still doing that today, and hopefully it goes forward. And anything else that we can do along the way is a bonus. Like I said, if we can help bring someone else along, then that's great. You know what? The best structures, you've seen this, I don't know if you've seen it or not, I haven't seen anything about it lately, this thing that they're building at the site or at ground zero, whatever. And the building built to withstand, I don't know, I forget what the blast is. But I remember the guy asking him, the architecture there, or the architect, so if a 757 loaded with fuel crashed into this building, it would stand. Yes, without hesitation, he said, it would stand. Some confidence, isn't it? I hope that I am building something, starting with this thing that we've been going through, building something that will stand, something that will make it to the end, because it says, he that endures until the end. So we can endure, brethren. The best structures in the world stand on a firm foundation. And that's what we've had a chance to work on this week, and it's good. It's all good. These days, in my mind, are the rebar. Hopefully I've been pouring some concrete and reinforcing it with rebar, steel rods. Because I know that whatever I build can't make it without that foundation. And it goes all the way back. And Our Messiah tells us that those that were bidden will not taste my supper. These days are the rebar in your foundation. Don't stop building. Do not stop building, brethren, until you are eating bread. As this one guy says, well, whew, how good it must be. What a blessing it must be to eat bread in the kingdom. Well, brethren, I ask you, do not stop building. Do not stop thinking about this foundation until you are eating bread and drinking wine with your king. As he says, I will not drink. I won't partake of the vine again until I drink it with you. What a glorious day when we're partaking of bread and maybe even sharing a cup. Doesn't have to, but don't stop, brethren, until you're eating bread and drinking wine with your king in paradise. And might I say congratulations for another year of being invited. Or more important yet, congratulations on attending.